Let's see what happens in this first map.
All right, ready for this one. It's actually funny. We watched Method NA practice on this quite a bit when the Mythic Dungeon Invitational was first kicking off, so that would have been all the way back on, I guess it was the China weekend. Now we've made it all the way to our final weekend, and we were trying to figure out the last two teams that are going to get to go to that first LAN. But one of the things that we saw in that practice hours was trying to go for these massive pulls at the very beginning, trying to get all that trash at the very beginning and then kite it across the room. And we know that JB is going to have a big task there of helping to deal with those explosives.
Of course, it's going to be very interesting to see how they handle all these explosive orbs. It can be very, very scary for these teams. You see, E-Man is doing a really good job. He's got all of the threat he needs, and he's ran off into the distance, into that sunset here in the Halls of Valor. And they've done, Method's done a really good job. They've killed all the trash. Just the dragon remains. He's got to run back, and they've got to head towards the first boss. But it looks like Dark Slashers has, I want to say, even better movement here. They've done the trash just as fast, and they're much closer to the boss. You know, they've been much more efficient and calculated with their movement. They kill the dragon a little bit later, but these bosses should be engaged at like the exact same time right now.
You know, you can see that little bit of extra movement is going to be a big deal, but Method NA quickly going to be able to get there and pull the boss. Just, I think it was a smidge earlier, but we were pretty much neck and neck in percentages. Dark Slashers falling a little bit behind. Both of these teams going to pop that lust to get things started. Now we need to be looking in the skies above. They need to watch out for these dragons.
Yeah, the dragons are really scary. You know, you have to make sure that you look. They can come from either the left side or the right side of the platform. And something that's also really exciting here is this: we're seeing something that I don't think anybody was expecting to see in the tournament. There is actually a BM Hunter over on the side of the Dark Slashers. It is going to be his job to handle all of those explosive orbs. Keep a lookout for him during those AoE pulls. The AoE, of course, with BM is significantly weaker than marksmanship, but the ability to handle the explosive orbs is much higher. The Fire Mage, of course, not very good at it. That Havoc Demon Hunter, of course, also not very good at those explosive orbs. And over on Method's side, it'll all be in the hands of the Warlock to handle those orbs, and that will really be the highlight of the dungeon.
That's the main thing. Is like we saw last time that we were in this dungeon, a Warlock having to deal with it quite a bit, and it really did affect that damage, right? And ultimately, at the very end, is when we saw the Warlock being able to focus, deal a lot of damage when they finally got back to that boss fight. But here we will see Marv able to just do an impressive amount of damage to start things off on Himdall, and Himdall falling down much quicker here on the side of Method NA. We talk about similar pull times going out all around, but they get about a 10% lead, and they're widening that lead, and we know that Himdall doesn't need to fall all the way down to 0%. So in just a few seconds, if Method NA keeps this up, they will be able to get him down. You can see them just getting chunked every time that horn is going about. JB doing a good job of getting his team back up, but not rushing to it. He can be a little bit greedy. We know that you have a little bit of time after that damage does go out, so he can focus on getting in as much damage as possible. And you can see both of these druids, both of these restoration druids, getting good damage in the meantime.
Yeah, so the real difference here between these two teams, of course, if you look over at the damage meter, this is the power of the double Windwalker versus that Fire Mage who's struggling a little bit on single target. Perhaps maybe Dark Slashers is looking to do some larger AoE pulls, but of course it can get very out of hand with those explosive orbs dropping. 10% left for the Dark Slashers. Method is moving up here to do this first pull. Interesting to see that they're doing both the bottom and top of the staircase together. Excellent grip, of course. Once they start kiting here, they do have to be careful. There is a patrol at the bottom of the staircase if they decide to go that way. These Thunderbolts as well as Lightning Storms from the trash is very scary, and it looks like they might even just have the DPS to stay in there and kill it all together. No need to kite when you can just kill all the mobs with the power of those Windwalkers.
So another thing that definitely do want to note, kind of talking about, yes, the Fire Mage maybe not excelling, really not taking off yet in this dungeon on the side of Dark Slashers. You are locking that in for the entire dungeon pool, the entire series. So maybe that is something that really does kind of catch fire a little bit later on. Method NA, though, they're starting to move over towards Herja, one of the more difficult bosses that we're going to have inside of this dungeon, especially on this difficulty. Warlock being able to get off some pretty decent damage here while still dealing with those Fel explosives that are affixed to this dungeon. You can see right now getting that Drain Soul off. And
got to be careful there on the side of Dark Slashers. It appears that they may have accidentally Gorfiend's grasp all of those mobs into that healing circle. That is just something you really don't want to do. Similar to Sanguine in other dungeons, these mobs will drop a healing circle on the ground that will not only heal the trash mobs that stand in there, but also the players. So perhaps they got a little bit of health there. They were able to clean it up. Method is pulling further ahead in trash. They've ran straight towards Herja, and Dark Slashers is still clearing out this hallway.
Yeah, so the thing I wanted to note about the Warlock is when you are paying attention to the Warlock, you very quickly can see the way that it's talented is going to be very different, because they are needing to focus on those fell explosives, but also that means you focus a lot less on AoE damage. You don't need to be getting out the massive amounts of Seeds of Corruption. So going to be able to get that additional damage in other places because of it, while still dealing with that affix very well. Another thing that you're going to notice on your screen is Method NA kind of moving around those ads right in the front there and only pulling the big ads. Those don't give you trash, or don't give you percentage. They are actually trash. So you can just avoid them, pull the encounter, get it started, and now once again, that Drain Soul going to be coming out to bring down that Fell Explosive. But Dark Slasher's starting to fall behind at this point. They need to go about those pulls that Method NA already accomplished, but they have a little bit of extra trash in their tank because they did move out from that hallway. They still do have these 2 packs here before they even do get up to the antechamber of Herja.
Looks like there's a really big pull actually coming out of the Dark Slashers right now. We see the Hunter ran left and the Death Knight ran right. They are having a ton of mobs here over on the side, while Method is just taking care of 2 big boss mobs together. Dark Slashers is looking like they're going to be attempting to take care of as much of this hallway as possible. This is an extremely dangerous pool with explosive. Things can get out of hand very fast. Good death grip into that Dragon's Breath. Make sure that if these teams fall behind on this explosives or they miss a kick, one orb goes off. You see people getting low on that little screen there. You got to be careful. They're doing a really good job bringing all these mobs down together. If they clean this up, they'll have a ton of trash advantage. And of course, the most important timer in this dungeon isn't necessarily how far to the left or the right you've gone, but it is going to be watching that Lust debuff. Knowing when you can use that Lust and which bosses that you have it available for are going to be very important for getting through here really safely.
Another thing that you will see is that first explosive did go off. Ultimately, the healer is going to go down on the side of Dark Slashers, but because of the timing, it ends up working out relatively well. They make up a little bit of time, and they're going to be moving over to Fenrir, keeping that Bloodlust in mind. They'll have that a little bit later on. There is going to be no Lust on the side of Method NA while dealing with Herja. That's a route that Dark Slashers may be able to go down. Herja now being pulled, and we saw those 2 big baddies that get pulled before Herja. They're going to give us a little bit of insight into the mechanics that we're going to see from this boss.
So yes, so Herja is going to have 2 different flavors of abilities. Over here on the lightning side, she'll channel the Eye of the Storm, and of course also cast an Arcing Bolt on a player at the end of the Eye of the Storm. And then she will cast a Shield of Light following it to transition to the other side. And so when she's over on that lightning side, those 2 abilities will do increasing damage based on how long she spends over there. And then when she's here on the light side, she'll have a Bouncing Light ability, as well as she'll have this channeled Dodgeball ability. And you got to make sure that you can dodge these balls, otherwise they really are going to put a wrench into your plan, as hitting one of them will do AoE damage to the entire group. And if you take 2 or 3 hits, the healer could fall really behind, and if that bounce is going on during that time, it could spell the end of someone's life.
Definitely could, and we can see JB is going to get chunked there for a second. Then it's going to be the tank, then it's going to be the Warlock. A lot of pressure coming out from this boss. Dark Slashers, on the other hand, they've already started to pull that trash. They're getting very close to Fenrir. They've actually already engaged Fenrir as well, so they're getting a very efficient pull going.
So yeah, Fenrir, of course, has 2 phases. At the beginning, he's going to be always standing over here on the right in Mythic Plus mode, whereas if you maybe have done this dungeon on a different difficulty, sometimes he'll be over on the left, hiding out with all of his bear friends in his cave. But once Fenrir hits 60% over here, he will run off and lick his wounds. Of course, he will not actually be healing himself despite licking his wounds. And he's going to sit over there at around 60%, and then the team's going to have to run over there and engage him, and then run back. And so a lot of the times you'll see teams like to go to Herja first and then Fenrir, because the run back is extremely long, and you can gain a lot of efficiency out of having that movement speed buff you get from killing both of these bosses. But they also have the ability, with the power of the Death Knight, to mount up and run across the water and get good use of this outdoor space.
Yeah, and ultimately they went for that risky pool, and they are going to be leading in that trash department when they do get on over to Herja, which will be the next boss for Dark Slashers. They will just be able to run right up there. I'm pretty sure they got just about everything in the room, so there's going to be that 1 trash pool left. But JB going to fall down on the side of Method. When we watched them practice, this was actually a boss that was giving them a little bit of trouble. The battle res is going to come out here. That's going to be 1 death for each of these teams. Herja with only 9% left. They should be out of the woods on this one. We know that this is one of the most challenging fights. Dark Slashers, on the other hand, have Fenrir down at about 50%. JB getting chunked just 1 more time. The increasing damage that is coming out here can be scary even in these final moments, but that's going to be Herja down for Method NA at 48% as far as trash is concerned. Now they're going to go for that pull. Obviously, they didn't go for the more aggressive pull, so they got a little bit of trash before they do get on over to Fenrir, and now we can focus on Dark Slashers dealing with Fenrir. He already made that move to the other side to where the grass is greener, as you did mention before, Sours.
Yeah, so once they're engaging Fenrir, you see he's casting now this Ravenous Leap ability, and Idle unfortunately does not dodge that. You can actually use a movement displacement ability, such as a Blink or the Feral Charge, teleport there, or Displacer Beast, to dodge that debuff application. 2 stacks on Idle, so she's going to be falling a little bit behind, and of course, as she's taking all of this damage, it means that the healer damage on this fight is going to be fairly lacking. And you know, this is only a 23. We will be seeing, of course, one of these two teams advancing to do much harder dungeons than 24, but you can never disrespect these keys, because we even saw it took the life of JB earlier, and it could very easily take the life of any of these players here right now.
I need to say, so far though, this is looking like a much cleaner key for Rev and everyone over on the side of Dark Slashers. We've talked about how they had a more unlikely path to get here. They didn't necessarily have the craziest times. They had the easier side of the bracket. I'm going to be completely honest. Their side of the bracket was much easier, and a lot of teams made some mistakes for them to get here, but now they have made it. They're looking much cleaner, but Method NA going to be a very tough opponent, and now going for a much larger pool. We talked about how Dark Slashers took a risk. Now it's going to be on Method NA. We can see that their Death Knight is just getting absolutely chewed apart, but finally they are able to get control, and they are able to nearly catch up. They do it. They completely catch up in the trash department. They're going to have a slight lead on bosses. Now they move on over to Fenrir, and they may actually even pull ahead. This may be that big moment for Method NA. They just changed the sequence up, and that's the thing. After we see these second and third bosses respectively fall down for each of these teams, it will become very linear, and we'll have a much better grasp on where these teams do stand in the race. But this is that long trek that you were talking about before.
Yeah, there's a lot of running here now, so this is something that a lot of people don't really ever appreciate when you're doing a dungeon for speed, is just simply how much time you're spending running around. And for Dark Slashers here, they're going to have to make sure that they CC one of these Oxen, otherwise there is no way to skip past all of them. By using that Demon Hunter in prison there, they can simply sneak on by it, and then he should not follow them into the next rooms. If you engage one of those guys, they do a ton of damage with their Gore ability, can easily one-shot the tank as well as any melee DPS in range. Method NA has engaged the first phase of Fenrir, doing a good job, kind of spreading out, I want to say almost a little bit too far there on that, so the melee lost a little bit of uptime on him, but they have taken some additional trash into Fenrir so that they can gain some of that efficiency of doing this phase 1 of the boss while getting some additional kill percentage and pulling even further ahead.
Nice beefy, brave boy, efficient pull coming in there, and as you can see, Method does also get their Lust off of cooldown, so they're going to be able to use it on Fenrir, and that's the major change that we see between the path between these two teams. Method NA going to be using that Lust on Fenrir. They're already out of it now. Dark Slashers, you can see that they are going to have their heroism available, so they can use it when they are on, I will say, the more difficult boss in Herja, so that may be a thing that does really help them. We saw that JB ultimately did go down for Method in the final moments of that fight. That did add to their death timer. Everybody's tied up now, but if we see a death come in on the side of Dark Slashers, that actually, those 5 seconds could matter quite a bit. So that Lust will help out in that department as we see Fenrir moving on over to the other side, and quickly behind him going to be Method NA. And when they do finish this boss, they're going to be able to get out of Fenrir's little realm much quicker.
And so Dark Slashers is just dealing with these bosses now. They have, I believe, killed one of them, and now they're dealing with his friend. Once both of these bosses die, there is a little bit of RP, and then Herja is going to jump down and join the fray. And they do have this Lust available now. Of course, Method NA opted to use it on the phase 1 of this Fenrir fight, and now they're killing some wargs, which is a strange choice because these wargs are quite dangerous. Of course, it is this tyrannical setting as opposed to fortified, but if 2 wargs jump on you, it could very easily kill you. Doing a nice job, not taking too much damage. Everyone's nice and topped. You see JB sitting in bear form because he knows that it's really scary. And as they're moving into pull Fenrir, who starts at 60%, Dark Slashers is still clearing up this trash here, and Herja will be, of course, at 100% health.
Yep, definitely. And those wargs can be scary. They get out of hand very quickly, too. If you end up pulling a few too many, you know, the way that they actually do interact with each other, it does get out of hand. So we will see, though, Method NA decides to go for that. They're going to be at that 73% mark, and we already do know that they're quickly approaching that magic number, as they are going to have those kings to deal with before they get to those final two bosses. Fenrir going to hit that 47% mark, and Dark Slashers still have not gotten their pull on Herja, but they're getting very, very close to it. Only about 20% health, maybe even 10% health left on that ad that they are currently engaged with. But Fenrir, from here on out, is it pretty much smooth sailing for Method NA?
Well, they've handled this mechanic a lot better. You see the boss is jumping, and it will put out 3 debuff applications, but both of the time 2 players have dodged it. Only Coach Mitt here has been unsuccessful at dodging that jump, so he has 2 stacks to the debuff. But at this point in the fight last time, for Dark Slashers, there was 2 stacks on the healer, and there was 1 stack as well as on 4 other players. And so JB is able to spend a lot more time doing damage. Coach Mitt being almost getting hit by that boss there. Of course, the boss will focus or fixate 1 member of the team and chase them down. If you have a defensive cooldown or an immunity, or you're feeling really brave, you can actually take it. But here in this Tyrannical 23 setting, those melee swings do a ton of damage. Did a much better job on those avoids this time. The Warlock unsuccessful at his dodge, so now there's 2 stacks on Mitt and 1 stack over on Marv, doing a really, really good job handling these Fenrir mechanics, as Dark Slashers has engaged Herja. They're over on the Storm side, and there's going to be some scary lightning bolt damage coming out from there, and it's going to be a little bit of left to right, back and forth transitioning for them as they get ready to move on to the final boss.
Yep, so we can see Herja right now going to be engaged, Heroism on the side of Dark Slashers, but for Method NA, I want to point out the Warlock just one more time. We've seen Monks, we have seen the strength of Monks already. I don't think that we really need to dive into the strength of that as a DPS class, but Warlock's just being so flexible. You can see just pumping out that single target damage on Fenrir. In this particular instance, also has been incredibly good at dealing with those fell explosives. We've seen in other dungeons what they can do in AoE. We see their self-healing, so a very good pick to have in that range department. Fire mages are going to be a much more tailored pick that we talked about a little bit earlier on, and we were saying, hey, look, the fire mage hadn't really come online yet in that first fight. Now all of a sudden we are going to see the fire mage on the side of Dark Slasher. So a little bit of range love, We saw quite a few teams lacking in purely melee compositions in the DPS department, and now we are seeing something a little bit different out of Method NA and Dark Slasher, something a little bit more standard. Method NA going to have that speed buff that you did mention beforehand. They're going to have these 2 big guardians, and they're going to pull a 3rd as well. So they're going for this big pull here, and then they're going to be able to go up that ramp.
Yeah, so these Stormforge Sentinels that Method is currently engaged with are quite dangerous, and they are running a double melee team here with these 2 Windwalkers, and they cannot stand in these AoE pulses. There is also lightning going absolutely everywhere. If you're a melee and you've done a pull similar like this, you know just how awful it is. Unfortunately, Marv is still on that explosive duty, so it is up to these Windwalkers to handle these guys as everything explodes. Gotta watch out for that charge pulse. There is an orb there as well. They've done a really good job handling these. It's very easy, of course, to dodge these mobs with that speed buff, and if they had opted instead to deal with these Sentinels before they gain the speed buff, it could be a lot more difficult. But you see just how easy it is for them to run out of that charge, and then once they've done that, they've simply kill those 3 mobs up, and here comes our light bridge. Beautifully cinematic there, and they're going to run all the way up here and engage these kings.
So we got to keep in mind, Dark Slashers at 72%. We commended them for going for that big, risky pull, but Method NA was able to catch up. So even when Herja is done, they still need to hit that magic number of trash percentage before they actually go about that bridge and start to engage all of those kings, and then go in, fight Skovald, fight Odin.
Yeah, Method NA did a really good job, perhaps maybe even went a little bit over. We'll see as well as if they have brought up any of these beers in order to speed up this 4-king phase. Looks like we do see that red name on that king over there on the left, which means they've opted to beer on the left and then talk on the right. And they should just drag him over, and then they're going to engage. Very soon they'll be able to talk to the 2nd king, as this achievement beer will allow these mobs to be attackable, as this will be a combat flag and then a reset. While Dark Slashers, of course, has done a really incredible job over on Herja, dying a little bit slowly, but none of their team has died. Of course, JB did die during the method attempt of this boss, but they've done a really good job. It looks like Edel almost goes down there. Did a really excellent there. Like, they handled that fight very cleanly. A little bit slower than Method. As you see, Method is quite a bit ahead, and they still have, of course, to kill those 3 mini bosses down here for kill count by the Dark Slashers, as Method is, you know, continually killing these guys and getting further and further in the lead.
The thing that I really do want to note, though, is although Dark Slashers aren't winning currently, they just look so much better. They really did have somewhat of a shaky road. For a team to still be in that upper portion of the bracket is insane. And I think they would admit it too. They had some really rough dungeons, and right now they are going to look very clean in this first dungeon. Even if they do go down here, we've already seen some crazy improvement from them. Excited to see if they're going to be able to make their stand on map 2, or if this is where they can maybe catch up, if they can find a way to catch up. But it does seem like Method very much in the driver's seat in our upper portion of the bracket.
And of course, the speed buff here that you get after killing those 2 side bosses has ended as soon as you enter combat with all of these kings. If Method somehow dies to these Fellblaze rushes without a failure detection pylon, it could set them back a tremendous amount of time. The run back is extremely far from the bottom of the dungeon all the way back up to the top. Dark Slashers is, you know, they're engaging those Sentinels now. They have to hit that 84% mark so that they can join Method at the top of the dungeon, engaging these kings. You know, Mid's getting quite low, but this mob should be almost dead. He's got a couple of buffs, and he's got that dagger throw, so that's where Mid's health went. And now they've just got a little bit of RP. They've got some time to relax. You can drop a food buff, heal yourself up, maybe check your augment rune, check your flask, make sure everything's good, you know, wait for your cooldowns, and then engage the boss.
Start talking about what you're going to do for the next dungeon, right? The next one could be a bit of a mystery, but you got to be focused up. Make sure that you do get that advantage to go into the 3rd dungeon if you do get some crazy shenanigans broken out on you. But ultimately, the stakes are high here. Even though this isn't the elimination match, you are fighting for that guarantee to go for the LAN. Method NA really is going to be the last hope for Method, you know, so this is an exciting thing for them, a very important thing, a little bit of stress on them, but they sit in a good position right now already, interacting with that God King Scovold. And he talked about just how scary yesterday. We got to cast Halls of Valor. We talked about just how scary this boss really can be. A lot of big damage can be going out onto the group.
Yeah, so this Fellblaze rush that he's going to cast, so right now he's of course casting Ragnarok, and you see there's a slight delay before they activate that shield, which will allow the first mechanic following the Ragnarok to be completely negated by that Aegis. So you see the Savage Blade comes out, the shield is still up, and he's done 0 damage. And now the shield has been knocked down, and so Scovold is going to reclaim his Aegis, and he's going to spawn 3 fire adds. You see Method is doing a really good job to stay stacked in melee. That way the fire adds all spawn close and can be killed as fast as possible. If you're standing out in ranged, a fire mob is going to stand out there, and it can be much more difficult to deal with. You know, this fire petals that they're putting on the ground can do a tremendous amount of damage you stand to them, so you want to avoid them. You see there goes out the Fellblaze Rush, did like 75% of Dark's health there, and it could very easily take your life if you're not fully topped off with anything ready to handle it.
There's a heroism, though, coming out from Method NA. Even with going fast, they are going to have that reset. We know that Odin, you won't have the most uptime. There's some pretty crazy stuff that goes on there, not as difficult as a boss. You talked about the threats that can be thrown at you by God King Scovold as he goes to cast another Ragnarok, but they do have that heroism buff. They're going to chunk him down just a little bit quicker. Heroism still going to be about 3 minutes away on the side of Dark Slashers, and they are still working on those kings, still working on that trash. That's why they're at that 89% mark right now. Both of these teams going to be tied up as far as deaths are concerned. So this is a true testament to where they are. This is pretty much their true score. They both have those 5 seconds already taken away. And you can see Method NA about to take down the God King and find themselves in a phenomenal position when they do pull Odin.
Both of these teams are definitely looking much better than they were yesterday. Method did have a couple of sloppy pulls and deaths in various dungeons, and they've done this one so much more cleanly. You know, during the first day, you know, your heart is going, everything is, you know, everything's happening all at once. They've had a full day's rest to think about it. They've had plenty of time today to get ready for this match. So they're doing so much better. And, you know, this is the kind of stuff that you expect to see out of the first seed team. You know, where was this Method yesterday? Really incredible showing for them. And also, Dark Slasher's performance in this dungeon is incredible. This is a 7th seed team that nobody expected to come here, playing absolutely out of their minds, but they're just not playing as out of their minds, of course, as Method is, as they just take down God King Skullvault right about now.
Well, the big thing is Method has already been tested, right? They have made it here on one of the most difficult brackets that you really could see. There were some pretty tough ones on the EU side as well, but for this bracket, they got the tough teams in NA, and they are able to make it here, taking down a lot of teams that we expected maybe even to make it back into a rematch. So Method NA definitely has proven their worth in the NA region regardless of how far they go based off of that. Dark Slashers, that was why I was kind of saying they didn't prove it nearly as much. And now today, even though they probably won't win this map, I think they have proven just how far they can go in this series and this entire tournament. But now that Odin has come down, we talk about how there are a lot of friendship fights in this one where you don't need to take them all the way down to 0% health because you're just palling around, you know. But ultimately here for Odin, that is going to be the case. And we also know that there is going to be a damage buff going out to all of these players.
And what's really also cool about this Odin fight is since it takes place at extremely high health and it ends at that 80% mark, leather classes love to wear that legendary belt, does tremendous damage during that first 10% of the boss's health, and the leech it provides will also keep you really well healed up, making sure that the group did a nice job there, maybe gripping that Storm Forge a little bit early there, but they excellent kick. Of course, if one of these surges goes off, the next one will cast faster and faster, and they could easily claim the life of somebody on this team. But nobody will actually die on this Odin fight. Instead, they will simply be sent up to be a spectator. And the other, of course, mechanic you see going on here is these swirlies on the ground that are going to stick up swords, and then you've got to dodge all of these balls.
Full boss fight ahead is going to be Method NA right now. Now they're going to have that Valkyr buff, so that's going to make them do even more damage. And still, as you already mentioned, Odin, this entirety of this fight is going to be in Sindaria range, going to be in that legendary belt range. That's not even going to be really too much of an option on the side of Dark Slashers, especially not compared to Method NA. JB going to get chunked for just a second, gets pulled back up, but we can see both of these monks are just going to be doing impressive damage based off of that. Warlock trying to keep up, not doing a bad job, but ultimately it looks like Odin is going to be an easy engagement for Method NA, and they're looking incredibly polished here in this first look of our winners round as we try to determine which of these teams from NA is going to be the first to guarantee their spot at the first ever LAN.
Yeah, really incredible showing out of both of these teams here. Just a few % remaining for Method NA before this dungeon is officially their victory. Nothing, you know, we'll always say, oh, nothing can possibly wipe us now, but you never know, right? So it should be okay.
Nobody says that in groups that I'm in. Never.
There's just 3% remaining. They should be all right to clinch this one out.
I will say they could probably wipe right now and still win. That is the crazy thing. It wouldn't be the easiest task, but God King Skullvault still going down for Dark Slashers. Method NA, it's a long run back, but they have a pretty commanding win here, and I'm excited to see how this racks up against some of the other teams that have done this Halls of Valor dungeon. It isn't the dungeon that we've seen the most so far due to the map pulls, but congratulations to Method NA, a strong start for them.
Yeah, Method has proven their worth to Odin, and really proven their worth to the audience as well as they continue to do so. This is an interesting situation because I feel like as we watch the Americas, our biggest concern has been we need to cut down on sloppy deaths, we need to tighten up the gameplay, but in this series already, just in this one map, the gameplay was tight. There was one death apiece, this was extremely cleanly run, so now for Dark Slashers down one map, it's a little bit of a different equation. You have to shift gears, you have to find a little bit of extra DPS, you have to find the slightly better approach to how you use your bloodlust. Was the pathing ideal? You really have to start searching for those extra inches as opposed to finding those miles that we've seen other teams struggle with.
Well, and Sours, I'm curious if you agree with me. I really feel like for the most part, damage is going to be relatively similar there from what we saw. Obviously, we talk about those little things like Sindarias, which can be a lot, but that wasn't even something that was really brought into the mix because that boss wasn't even engaged, at least while we were watching. So it does become a thing of is that pathing the primary factor that put them in this situation? Because that pathing seems like such a little difference, but if you look at the pulls, they were all pretty similar. They engaged that first boss at pretty much the same time. We do see that the Dark Slashers go for that really aggressive pull a little bit earlier, but both teams do it. I think going to Herja may have just been the faster thing there.
Well, Method just happened to do everything faster there. They, you know, the first boss died around the same time, but then they ran up into the top of the stair pull, and then they pulled ahead as they ran to the left, and the pull that Dark Slashers did looked really impressive, but once Method finished up that boss, they came and did the exact same pull, proceeded to pull further and further in the lead. They turned 2 minutes into like 3 minutes, into like 4 minutes ahead, and you know, that's just, they kept on, they turned an inch into a foot into a mile, and that's how they claimed that map.
Yeah, it really was just advantage here, advantage here, advantage here, and then by the end, as you pointed out, Rich, a full boss ahead. We'll have to see if Method can close us out. I know more so than most teams, they want to end up at that Global LAN final, get a little bit of revenge for their brothers over in Europe, but Dark Slashers certainly not going to make it easy. Can they tie this up? We'll find out on the other side of this break. Dark Slashers looking to tie up this series and will look to do so by slashing darkly in Black-Rock Hold. Now, Sours, why are we going to Black-Rock Hold?
Well, it's probably because they have, you know, that blood DK, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I definitely think the Blood DK is going to give him the edge there in Black Rook.
You know, we talked about the fact that was the mage was something that they had in their group. When is it going to come online? Obviously, with this pool, this is a pretty strong second or third pick for them. So they did bring that in for maybe not just this, but it is something available to them in this map pool. We've seen it be strong in the past, but we've also seen quite a few teams mess it up. So they're going to need to play perfectly, and this is really the test for me for Dark Slashers. That last dungeon looked good. They looked very clean. Yes, they didn't win, but they only had one death ultimately. I need to see them come out and play that cleanly. And when you have that mage and you can grab that arcane blitz over and over again from the Arcanist, if you play cleanly in conjunction with that, damage isn't going to be too much of an issue.
Yeah, Rich, much like you, I'm at the point where obviously the very first thing we saw from Dark Slashers was that abysmal performance on Maw of Souls. So I'm at that point where I want to believe too. I want to believe this is a team that just had a rough map. They're otherwise a very clean team. They're a very good team. I need to see a little bit more, and I think this is a situation where they've obviously put themselves in a position to be successful. They have the mage. Certainly that does not guarantee them the map, but when played correctly, when played expertly, the mage has generally iced out this map for the team bearing it. Can Method certainly fight against it? Absolutely, but Dark Slashers definitely has the advantage here, Sours.
Both teams actually did not finish this dungeon when they played it as a starting map earlier in the map pool, so we'll have to see if they can both clean up their performance. It is going to be on that mage. I believe that Dark Slashers had a pretty nasty wipe that set them back way behind, and Method, of course, played against one of the strongest Black Rook Hold teams in the tournament, which is why they ended up losing. So both teams just have to play cleanly, play it smart. If Dark Slashers play like they did in Halls of Valor, they should be able to take this to a third game, which is definitely something that nobody saw coming.
Yeah, for sure. And again, we've been in the lower bracket for a while, so obviously the stakes are a little different here. Obviously, you want to get that win, you want to advance to the Global LAN Finals, but if you're Dark Slashers, I kind of want to just see you, as we were saying, Rich, focus on playing this correctly. If you do lose, that's fine. You're going to go down to that lower bracket. You're going to have a chance against Omega Snipe, which you've already beaten, potentially, so that's definitely what I want to see here. But no more talk. Let's hop into this map. It is going to be Black Rook Hold again. If Method cinches this, the Global Finals are theirs. If they lose, they're going to have to go to map 3. Obviously, Dark Slashers looking to upset the status quo here.
Dark Slashers, I don't think there's any chance. For them, they need to win this. They need to play like they need to win this. Obviously, they have that second lifeline, but you can't leave it up to that, especially with this team that, you know, we've already seen every now and then they play a little bit less than perfect, but now going in with that standard stealth motion, they're going to be running by all this trash and get straight to the Amalgam of Souls. They'll make up that trash percentage. There is plenty of that to go around here in this dungeon, and we can see everybody making their way there without a problem. No rogue, though, on the side of Method NA. Definitely something you want to bring up, because that means that they're going to need to do it in a different way, and we see that on the side of Dark Slashers as well. Most likely going to be using those Invis Pots.
Yeah, of course, that Invis Potion will put your DPS potions on a 10-minute cooldown until you'll be able to use it again. And we're going to see some of the difference in these two teams' DPS potential here on this first boss. The power of that double Windwalker versus this. Now we have a lot of spec swaps on the side of Dark Slashers. We do see, you know, one of my favorite abilities if you're that Marksman Hunter, that is a Sentinel flying in the air. He has gone from BM to Marksman, and he has embraced the power of the Sentinel. And we see the Mage has, of course, also changed from Fire to Arcane. So the Arcane Mage does incredible damage with that spell steal buff. And while Method NA was pulling ahead, Dark Slashers is actually catching up quite handily here on this boss, and they're doing a really, really good job just putting out a ton of damage.
The real test is going to be at that 50% mark, though, for Amalgam of Souls. We're going to see these ads coming out in just a second. Both of these guys having Blood Death Knights on their teams are going to kind of go for that strategy where most likely they go for a giant Gorfiend's Grasp to kill them all. If you don't kill the ads, you're most likely going to be going down as a squad. Not too much else you can do about that. The real question is, because they both have Druids, are they going to go for the root to keep them outside? We see on the side of Method NA, they are going to do that, which means the burst of damage that Amalgam of Souls puts out isn't going to happen until the 15% mark.
That's right. So both teams did a really good job handling those ads. Of course, by keeping one of these ads out, the boss will do nothing until 18%, and then it'll begin its channel and then do an explosion. If any of these ads had hit the Amalgam of Souls, it will make his explosion do increased damage, and without a immunity or a way to absorb that damage, it will very handily take your life, and then you'll have to expend either a battle rest charge or do the boss one man down, or perhaps even more. We're just reaching that point now for Method. A little bit behind now for Dark Slashers. They have been catching up and then falling behind and then catching up. They are in that execute range, doing a really good job. No deaths on the side of Method. We'll see how well Dark Slashers can handle this explosion. Very good. Well immune, of course, by the turtle and that walk from the Demon Hunter. Just clean up this boss here. Once it's dead, they've got a little bit of RP, and then we'll have to see how big both of these teams decide to go in the above hallway.
You can see both of them dealing with that burst of damage that comes out very, very well. Amalgam of Souls not yet to fall for Dark Slashers. We talked about how last time Method NA slowly got their lead already on the first boss. The first thing that they even engage combat in, they are going to be able to find their lead. It's not by much yet, but this is really going to be a war of inches. If they keep grabbing those inches over and over again, they're going to win the war overall. The question is that mage going to be enough for Dark Slashers once they get to this Arcanist that's coming up in just a few short seconds here, folks? Is that going to be enough for them to just time warp their way all the way to victory?
Of course, there's a lot of team communication needs to be done in order to execute that mage strat correctly. You want to make sure that you're calling when you get the appropriate number of stacks so that the DK can then control undead and allow the team allow the mage, of course, to eat that sugary crusted fish feast and regain all of his mana to begin the process once again. During this big scary pool that Method is just engaged here in the hallway, this dungeon typically does have a bursting affix, so that spider pool becomes a lot less scary when those mobs are no longer bursting onto the whole group. Did a really nice job, no fear at all, clearing those up. They're bringing down this champion patrol down to this spinner. Of course, you could go a little crazy and pull all sorts of champions together, but if they manage to get off their frontal cone attack, it will do a 50% health buff on all mobs in range, which will make them take significantly longer to kill. The Dark Slashers, of course, has opted to go a little bit crazy. They ran all the way up that staircase. They've actually pulled ahead of Method now, but if one of these health buffs go off, or even if both of these health buffs go off, while they could have already engaged the trash, the health could be significantly higher. They're doing a really good job cleaning everything up. The spider is getting really low, and Method is now, it looks like they're actually going to opt to pull everything in this room. That's two champions, a nice line of sight coming out from E-Mangle, doing a good job. There's the Gore Fiends, and now the team has got to be careful here. Death could be extremely costly here. They only have one battle res, and there's a fairly long run back here. Marv is doing a really good job to stay out of range of these mobs so that they don't cast shoot on him. JB's got to make sure that he keeps all these people feeling really healthy. You can see that Dark is just taking huge hits of damage in melee. If he gets double targeted by a shoot or by any other abilities on this trash, could very easily take his life, and that's very, very bad.
So one thing to know, as you mentioned, as the Warlock, you can kind of sit at max range. That's going to be one thing that you can do as that squishier Clothwear to stay out of this. This time, we're going to see Marv switching up his talents quite a bit, going to need to focus on that AoE quite a bit more, and you're going to see plenty of those seeds being sent out there to do that damage to accomplish this goal. And Method NA, as much as I said, hey look, Dark Slashers, they just need to go for these clean little pulls. They don't need to go too crazy. They just need to make sure that they get the Arcanist online correctly, which they are going to now be doing. Method NA needs to do something kind of the opposite. Yes, they did see what happened with Dark Slashers yesterday, but Method NA ultimately kind of needs to find places to make up time because they are not going to have this main strategy. And so far, we've seen them go for these big pulls. They're slightly ahead right now, but will that hold now that Dilemma is firmly online? Big pull coming in right now. Dilemma going to be the bearer of bad news to this trash. Dilemma also going to be taking quite a bit of damage. Does a smart play there by getting out of LOS, quickly getting out of that volcano on the ground as well, and the rest of the ad's going to be cleaned up as long as they bring down Shamalama Ding Dong.
The Method Dark Slashers did unfortunately have Glix go down at the start of that first pool, but it didn't even matter because the insane damage coming out of that Arcane Mage killed all that trash almost instantly. JB has also, it appears, died. He is now running back, an extremely long run back for him. And his team's got to be careful because while JB is running back, those Grievous stacks will be building up on them. If he doesn't make it back to his team in time, some more of his members could fall, but all 5 members of Dark Slashers are here together, handling this same trash pool. Dark is getting a little bit low, but JB should be back in any second now to heal him back up to full. There he is. You see him coming just around the corner. Dark's got to make sure to be careful, perhaps use a health stone, but he's going to be brought back up. Grievous is no problem at all, and they are now just a little bit ahead, but of course, this is the same, similar thing actually to what happened to Method when they did this dungeon earlier in the tournament, where they looked really, really good up onto these bosses, and then that power of the mage skyrocketed the other team ahead of them every single time.
The other thing that we have to note, though, is the mage isn't always going to be the highest on the DPS, right? We are going to see those moments where it goes, okay, now we can use the offensive cooldowns of our other classes, let the mage eat that fish feast, let the mage actually go about resetting those arcane blitz stacks, so when we get to the place where we really do need to rely on that buffed mage damage, we are ready to do so. But Ravencrest going to be pulled here by Method NA. As long as Dark Slashers do everything right, they're not going to really need to worry about the mechanics too much. That's just how this arcane blitz strategy is going to work. That's one of the reasons it's so good. It keeps stuff very clean. But Method NA, they need to deal with what Ravencrest is throwing down. What are some of those mechanics that they're going to need to be avoiding here, Sour?
See, right here we have, for Method NA, they're dealing with this I-beam or I-beam channel that Solana Ravencrest is using. JB doing a really good job to keep all of those in one puddle, and now the boss has decided that she is instead going to be lasering Marv, and it's always a sad day when you're a caster out there and you have to run along this wall here. Doing a really excellent job not to stand in any of these puddles and do damage. Of course, Marv has been targeted again. That is a feels bad, man. Can we get an F for his DPS in the chat? That is not where you want to be as a ranged caster. Of course, Dark Slashers has now just pulled, and we'll see just how strong the power of this Arcane Mage is. Method was significantly ahead in boss health when this pull started, but Dark Slashers is closing that gap very, very handily. This Brutal Glaive debuff coming out, going on to the Hunter, that is really someone you don't want to have it on. Hunters do not have a lot of survivability. The power of the turtle and perhaps the exhilaration can help keep him alive, but he's going to need a lot of help from Edel there to stay at full health. But the bosses, you know, this is the power, of course, of that Arcane Mage. They were behind, and now they've pulled ahead, and they should kill this boss handily before Method NA is even able to.
All right, so the Mage strat is like the ebb and flow of the ocean. Waves come in, waves come out, and their wave's about to roll back out to sea, right? They're going to need to reset. They're going to need to get those stacks as they go about this next trash pull. Obviously, the mage is going to be very strong during that next trash pull, which traditionally is very dangerous. But the thing is Method NA, even in light of not having this mage pull, yes, they pulled this boss much earlier. The setup for the Arcane Blitz had to come in. All of that is very true, but they're still within about 15%. Method NA is holding on very well. If we see a single mistake come in from Dark Slashers, this is very much a 2-0 on the side of Method NA. So this team looking phenomenal, even without having this incredibly powerful advantage of having a mage in this dungeon. I mean, we see the mage doing in the area of 10 million DPS. And now this big pool has to be one of the places for Dark Slashers to get that time to widen their gap, because already Method NA is going to be knocking on that door.
Of course, for those hunters at home scratching their heads still wondering why in the world is this guy running Sentinel, here is going to be the power of that insane Sentinel AoE damage. The mage doesn't need to worry about building stacks right now. Instead, he can let the cooldowns of his friends, that power of that hunter, as well as the demon hunter, do incredible damage here. If they had waited for stacks, they could have potentially fallen behind, but the talent choices of the rest of the players on this team have allowed them to go straight into this pull without having to wait for the mage and engage it that much faster than Method. And then they will have, of course, that mage available again for the following bosses to kill them so much incredibly faster than Method is able to. Method is doing a really, really good job handling all this trash, killing it just a little bit slower than this team. And now we're at perhaps the scariest part of the dungeon, boulders. Rev just barely dodging 2 boulders there. That could have been a disaster. He did an excellent job, and once he's reached now the top of the staircase, no more boulders are going to be coming down.
Nothing bad ever happens here, man. Oh. I don't know what you're talking about. They're not dangerous. Nothing ever goes wrong there. I don't think that's scary, not at all. Not in this spoopy little dungeon. We can see Rev now going to be moving up here, trying to get a big pull once again while having that mage. Rev wants to get as many of these bats as possible, as many of the demons as well, so Dilemma can just really sink his teeth in. Rune of Power going to get dropped, and then from there it is just going to be a portents for doom. But Glick, not going to be no jump in the damage department, either going to be able to just constantly I-beam there, going to be getting reset over and over again. So very well done all around from the DPS on the side of Dark Slashers, getting very close to their next boss. Method NA fighting their way to that boss as well. They go for a very big pull, and they're doing a good job with it. So all of a sudden, even with that mage damage, you can't say it enough. Method NA, very, very close. But let's talk about how this boss is going to look for these two teams. What are the mechanics that they need to worry about?
Sure. So what's really scary here, of course, on the Smash Bite is that he is going to be putting out these bat lasers everywhere, and the puddles that they drop on the ground are going to do a ton of damage to players if they end up standing in them. Of course, Method got here a little bit later, but they will be pulling it sooner, as Dilemma does need time to build up stacks of this buff, but they should be able to catch up and pull ahead. The really scary mechanic, of course, is going to be that slam on the ground. It's going to do an incredible amount of damage to each one of these players' health pools. If they are not top and they're bleeding out to Grievous, you see it just went out there for Method, brought Dark down to 10%. If JB ever falls behind for some reason or another on that Grievous, perhaps his friends decided to take a little bit of a swim in the fell puddles, then they could very easily die to that. They do have 2 battle reses available to them and 3 battle res classes, so they shouldn't have too much to worry about, but the power of that slam is very dangerous. And if it takes you, exactly, right? It's very scary, but as long as you take, you stay level-headed, this thing is never going to do more damage than this. You can get out pre-hots as a Druid and everything you need to be able to handle that slash very well. They all chunk really low, but it takes a while for that Grievous to build up on these guys, so they did a really good job handling it. And the other mechanic that we, of course, see this guy...
Mechanics, who cares about him? Because we got a mage. Boom! We're going to just see it melt down. Heroism popped on both sides, and now Dark Slashers finally, once again, able to catch back up, and it looks like we are going to see Smash Bite fall in just a few short seconds here. Where do you see Method catching up? Let's say that they're able to completely survive here. They get it down at the clip that they have been going. Where are they going to be able to find that additional damage?
Well, first off, they've got to finish off this boss very safely, and then what they're going to have to do is run all the way up the staircase and pull all of the trash in the hallway into the last boss, and then cleave it all down together. A very dangerous pull, but it's going to be required now that Dark Slashers has once again shot forward into the lead with the power of that Arcane Mage. We're going to see how big the Dark Slashers decide to go here. If they decide to do the exact same pull, then Method is going to be in a world of trouble. That's going to be Dark Slashers' game to lose, looking so much better than they were yesterday. All of the shaky feet, all of the jitters are gone. A really incredible play out of these guys. We see Rev chunking really low, but these mobs are stunned up. He's able to heal back up to full. Nothing's too scary. They're doing a nice job ailing these all down together. And so, of course, since they have opted not to do this trash with the boss, there is some time that Method can make up with the power of the double Windwalker by pulling these into the boss encounter. But Dark Slashers are looking really convincingly in the lead right now.
So that's the thing. You look at where places where Method can make up time, they need to go for these all-in pulls. If they go for something absolutely out of their minds here and then wiped on it, you wouldn't fault them for that, because they need to find a way to win against a mage. The mage team, on the other hand, doesn't ever need to make pulls like that. They're going to hit that 99% trash comfortably. They'll release that last percentage, that last little snack to their dinner when they are ready. But they are going to engage this boss, get ready to go. Dilemma's going to chill for now. He's going to actually build up those arcane stacks, those arcane blitz stacks in a little bit when the true demon behind this Raven Crest does pop out. But Method NA doesn't necessarily go for a crazy play. They don't go for anything out of this world. They just said, hey, look, we're going to play our own game. They're going to do their mage things no matter what we do. We'll let them play their game. We'll play ours. Let's see who comes out on top. Both of these guys currently dealing with the last boss. Of course, Ravencrest, not the scary end of this coin. You still got to follow the mechanics, though. You don't want to get hit by lasers. Lasers are bad. You don't want to be standing in volcanoes because of the affix. And now we can see it is going to be Dark Slashers who are very close to getting this boss down.
Method, is playing incredibly well this dungeon. And you have to think, in your position, you definitely expect to get taken here. Both of these teams are playing the exact same class composition that they played in the previous 23s they had in order to get here. And so that means that there is one map we have to be, of course, careful where to people with Warlocks like to take teams who bring mages. Of course, it is going to be game 3. They do have that first game advantage as well as the map pick leading out of here. Anything can still happen on Dentalian X. You definitely don't want to lose a member of the group to this first Shadow Bolt volley because they will be out for the rest of the fight. As long as Method, you know, can tell themselves, okay, it's all right to drop this game. We're going to do just fine in the next one, and then play just as well as they've done in the previous 2 games in the third one. They should be looking really scary in that third match. A lot of them dropping really low there on that Shadow Bolt volley coming out of Dentalian Axe. But the first transition is just coming out for Dark Slashers. If they can do a good job dodging all of these shoop-de-whoops, then they should be just all right.
I gotta point out how well Method really has played this dungeon. Like, they don't have the flashy mage strategy, but they play this dungeon perfectly, and they don't feel the pressure. You can tell that they don't feel the pressure, and that's the thing that they need to be doing throughout this tournament. They got to go for their map picks. They got to just play it their way. As much as I would have respected a crazy strategy to find lost time, what they're doing is also very respectable, and that is just like, I don't give a gosh darn what class you have. I know that we're one of the best teams in the world. We are going to mess up less than you do, but also on the side of Dark Slashers, we've seen them run this dungeon before. It was not this clean. So this is a team that's constantly improving. Both of these strong representatives for the NA region. It looks like Dark Slashers, though, will be able to extend this to a dungeon number 3.
Yeah, really, really great play out of both of these teams. Dark Slashers should be able to clinch out a victory here. Idle does end up going down. You have to be careful of this stinging swarm volleys. There are no battle reses left available for the Dark Slashers, but the boss is significantly further ahead. People dropping also quite low over on the side of Method. JB's got to make sure to stabilize his team. There they go, bring them all up healthily. Dentalian X falls, and there is only 5 additional seconds that these guys have. Just 1 now to do so much boss health, and this is Dark Slashers' win.
And also, you got to say, Edelweiss, the death there is less punishing than if you have it earlier on in the fight. If you die then you pretty much are just not going to be a factor for the rest of the fight. But Method NA going to play this out. You can see they're not really that far behind considering they don't have that massive amount of mage damage to be pumping out. They're going to get an additional intermission phase here, but all in all, Method looking like a very strong team, but congratulations to Dark Slashers for extending this.
Both teams basically playing this as well as they possibly could have. I think Dark Slashers, maybe there's a couple of spots where you could have played a little more cleanly, but Method's super impressive for not having a mage. And I think something we've talked about over the course of this tournament is essentially if you enter the situation where you have 2 really good teams, one of them has the mage, generally that's going to be enough of an edge to get them the win, but Method was right on their tails. I mean, again, it was like a 50% boss difference by the end, but for that dungeon without a mage, that is essentially being right on your tail.
Oh, for sure. I mean, there were moments where it really did seem like a possibility for Method, and we kind of saw this coming. When we were in the Halls of Valor, it was like, okay, they have this mage. What's going to happen? We know the map pool. It makes sense to go there at some point. We expected it to be coming in map number 2, and that's exactly what happened. But now we kind of know that Method has that pick advantage headed into this final one, and that could be a huge service to them.
Sours, obviously looking at the composition for Method, I mean, this is no surprise where we would expect them to go.
Yeah, of course, everyone is expecting, you know, the Arcway. That is the obvious pick, but you do see just how close that previous game was. Any one large mistake by either of those teams in the past series, the game could have very easily gone either way. If this was the Dark Slashers that we saw yesterday, then this probably wouldn't have ended up this way, but they've really, you know, shown up today, played absolutely incredibly, and that's how they were able to take this to this game 3.
Yeah, Dark Slashers, I mean, you have to still execute with that mage. There are a lot of pitfalls in that where you can have things go wrong, and we definitely have seen that over the course of this tournament, but we're going to talk more about this series when we come back from a short break. Don't go anywhere. We are going to figure out who is going to the global LAN on the other side of this break. More Mythic Dungeon Invitational coming up. No surprises as we head into map number 3 of this series. Gentlemen, Archway, Volcanic, the 23s really do write themselves in terms of what the compositions dictate, and Method not taking any chances. And you know what? It's easy to say, okay, well, this is a very bland choice, but I like it. It's a safe choice. It's what you're going to excel at. Do it. Get that win. Go to the global finals. You've thus far proven you are excellent at execution today. Keep it up.
Yeah, we've already seen them look good in this dungeon too, so I think that that's a big thing to note. Then they have the composition that obviously goes their way, and to be honest, even without the advantage in the last map, they looked very convincing. And if we saw the Dark Slashers that we saw yesterday in that dungeon, Method probably would have had a 2-0. So the real test of Dark Slashers is now, can you continue this clean play style? We know that the advantage is going to be a little bit less in the Archway compared to what we see in Blackrock Hold. So there are opportunities for Dark Slashers based off their pathing, based off of how they do to really catch up. But Method NA is a pretty scary team to be going up against here.
I know if you're Dark Slashers, you should be going for that win. You should be looking to win the series. I think at some point what I really want to see from them is what I said earlier. Approach this map to play to the best of your ability. Don't feel like you have to get crazy. Don't get yourself in a spot where maybe you start tilting, maybe things start going south. Just play a clean game, play to the best of your ability. Realize you have opponents who are going to be easier to beat in the lower bracket. And you know, Sours, is this, when you are competing in these kind of dungeon invitationals, is that a way you look at when you're going against an opponent you feel kind of outclassed about, or?
Yeah, I mean, like, everyone probably saw this coming. Method currently does have the fastest time of any team we've seen here in Archway. They've managed a 22:40. They did have 7 deaths, however, so they could go faster if they clean it up, but that 7 deaths also means that they could go much slower if something terrible goes wrong, right? Archway is a dungeon where, you know, if you pull too big, very easily these mobs can get a little bit out of control and kill some DPS, maybe kill the tank, perhaps take the life of a healer. And if you skip that first pull without killing any of the bosses, then you lose potentially a ton of time having to get back out into that dungeon.
Those 7 deaths are going to be a little bit misleading though, right? Because they are going to have some of those deaths be part of their core strategy. We expect to see some deaths come out on both sides to kick things off inside of this dungeon. That could be as high as 6 deaths depending on how they do decide to do it. So yes, 7 deaths compared to 1 death, it's going to be a little bit, I know I hate math, but I'm pretty sure that those are 2 very different numbers, but we'll have to see what they do when they actually jump into the dungeon.
I feel like old Rich hated math. Rich with glasses.
I actually like math now. I've been doing math all day, and I'm trying to be cool and
have
stuff.
Have a little abacus in the back.
Like, wow, numbers, guys. This is fun. A fun way to spend a Sunday, just doing math with my bros.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's my bro. Oh, man. Let's see some numbers.
Well, we're going to definitely see some numbers in this dungeon. Now, for Dark Slashers, they're going up against the Warlock, but we've talked about this kind of at length. While the Mage provides a really substantive advantage in Blackrock Hold, Warlock is really nowhere close in terms of what they provide. You know, for Dark Slashers, again, given in the face of the advice I gave, which is to play clean, make sure you just get in a match where you're showing winning ways, is this, Sours, in your opinion, an insurmountable hurdle?
I don't think so. What's really fun about Archway is that there's a really exciting cheese that is potentially possible with the power of Death Knights and Agrimar's Stride. Rev is really thirsty for this win, and he did show a crazy pull in Eltharian's Lair earlier. Maybe he's got that cheese in mind. We'll see if it happens. It involves those speed puddles. If he does this, if this guy is crazy enough, you know, some sort of insane strategy like that could produce a crazy time for these guys.
Do you think Thirsty Rev has the need for speed? I'm hoping. That cheese, too. I'm not sure how stable or good it actually is. I know exactly what you're talking about.
But if you're in a situation where we were talking earlier, I want clean play, but if you go the other route and you're saying, we need to do something crazy, we can't win this the fair way, bring me the cheese. Let's see what happens, though. The map is ready. We'll jump in. We'll see what Thirsty Rev is up to, if he's feeling thirsty, if he's feeling a little more conservative. Again, map number 3. The winner moves on to the global land. Everything on the line for these 2 teams. Let's see how it goes.
Rev very thirsty. He very thirsty. Bring us the cheese.
Yeah.
Bring us all the cheese.
I'm certainly a connoisseur of fine cheese myself. I want to see what these guys have in store. This first pull, you know, it's very, you know, standard what we see these guys do. These slimes are incredibly terrifying. E-Mangles over here is going to pull the Ghost so that he makes room for his team to slip on by, whereas the Dark Slashers are going to wait for the Ghost Patrol instead, and then they're going to move on through.
Now, I really... Okay, so we've talked about it just a little bit. It's a very unstable strategy. I'm not sure how good it can be. So really, if you pull the Death Knight, and this is going to go down over at Corstal Axe, you can just grab all of those pulls and become
Hold on a second. This here looks like these crazy Dark Slashers have opted to kill these slimes. Now, the explosion from these guys will do a ton of damage, and we're also dealing with that green slime jumping out. You know, this is something that you definitely don't expect to see. The power of the Fire Mage and that AoE damage from the Living Bomb and all sorts of other things will be able to handle those. They only have the Demon Hunter in melee. He should be able to sit in darkness and maybe use an immunity and handle this trash fine. Dark Slasher's able to get through this without a death. This was a really impressive pull out of these guys. Almost everybody up until this point, I would say everybody up until this point, has skipped a ton of trash up to here. Dark Slashers already breaking the norm. I expect great things from these guys in this dungeon. They're really impressing me.
And also, you know, we talk about how their picks were somewhat catered to this pool. They knew that they were going to be in this map pool going into today. Both of the teams did. And if you know Method NA, you assume that you were going to go here. So they have to know that they need strategies going into here. Dark Slashers already going to pull down that 24% based off that first pull. Now Method NA going the route that we have seen them go before. And we talk about how we've seen quite a few deaths come out of them. That is going to be based off of the skips that they do traditionally do. Even though those are deaths that are planned, you bring up 7 deaths. Let's say that 6 of those deaths are planned. Those are still going to add those additional 5 seconds to the timer. So cheese or not, regardless of what Dark Slashers do, if they aren't going for this pathing, we know that they could go once again for exactly what JB is doing to pull people on over. Even if they don't go for that, that could just be the additional seconds that they need. Already going to be 3 deaths for Method NA. They're going to need a few more to get everybody back on over there.
Yeah, finally they took a little bit of time there to actually finish dying up, but there was no rush at all because JB is just finishing his long run over here. Dark Slashers did a nice job clearing some trash all the way over towards Corsalax. They're heading the same way, but now they've decided to change their mind. They are heading over towards that robot who's got the speed buff, so maybe we're just going to see what these crazy clowns have up their sleeves. They've done some insane pulls up until now. Perhaps they're going to do another big pull here. They've pulled some mobs from the hallway. They've pulled everything in the room. They've pulled some mobs from the other hallway. They've engaged the boss. Another insane pull coming out of Dark Slashers. Rev has got all these strats up his sleeve. This is, you know, he wasn't supposed to be in this tournament. Oh, but that is what you don't want to see. 2 going down. There is a ton of damage. They must have missed a kick there on the healer as well as on Malene. They are able to pull Corsalax out of the room and reset him, which they are going to be able to do. That way they don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, in competitive WoW, there's a term for what just happened. It's called yikes. So yikes just happened for Dark Slashers. That's going to be really rough. They have that good start, but now all of a sudden, any deaths that they avoid based off their pull strategy going to be completely negated. Only 1 additional death for Method NA. We see them in the heroism already working phenomenally well on Zakal, getting him down. What are the mechanics that they need to be thinking about, though, as they progress further and further on this boss?
Of course, the scary things on Zakal are very similar to what we saw in the previous dungeon, where he's going to have a large AoE slam that's going to do a ton of damage to everybody in the group. Of course, there is no longer a Grievous affix, so it's not that scary. But if one of these players decides they want to bathe in a volcano or stand in one of these swirly areas on the ground or even on this trail of goop that is spawned, it will do a ton of damage to them, and it'll cause this slam that he does to kill one of them. But when they're all at full health, JB knows that there's not going to be really any damage going out. Here comes that slam. See, it only does like 55% to these monks, a lot less damage than in the previous dungeon. Nothing to be that afraid of. Doing a nice job. Everyone is staying really well healed up. These affixes are really not that scary at all for these guys over on Zakal. Volcanic is 100% avoidable, as well as Raging is not going to affect this boss encounter at all. Dark Slashers now re-engaging over onto Corsalax. Only 4 deaths, unfortunately, for them on that pull. That was the kind of pull that they absolutely needed to get done in order to catch up with this dungeon. Zakal on 20% for Method, though, going down really smoothly and cleanly. We're not going to see anything bad happen to these guys. They're making sure to stay clear of these pillars. They don't do anything at all during this fight, but if you stand on them, they will end your life, as they are about to end Zakal's life in just a second.
That they are going to do. Now, Dark Slashers, this is that cheese that you were talking about. It doesn't look like they are going to be going for it, at least out of what I've seen out of the corner of my eye. How exactly does that cheese operate for anyone at home that's like, wait, I heard cheese. I want to try to break the game in an interesting way? way. What exactly were you thinking that they might go for?
Well, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen right now. We'll see the Death Knight will run over and grab as many of these haste puddles as he can, and then if he's wearing the Agrimar's Stride legendary boots, then each one of those haste puddles he picks up will make him run faster and faster and faster until he goes light speed. But it looks like he is not opting to do that, or if you are going to be trying to do something crazy like that, then you might not try it at all until the boss is at extremely low health, because the boss has to be channeling an ability when you run out of that boss room. Otherwise, you could very easily pull that boss out of the room with you and reset it. It looks like they've opted not to do anything too crazy. They can do a couple of big pulls still to gain some advantage here, but Method NA already has the first boss down. Unfortunately, Dark Slashers did wipe on their first attempt of this guy with all of his trash, but they still have a shot, right? Method NA does have that first checkpoint. If anything catastrophic happens to them, they don't have nearly as scary of a run back anymore. Dark Slashers is doing a really good job here to finish it off, and of course, since Method NA cleared all of the spider trash on the way over to Felor Zakal, they've already engaged Nautira.
Dark Slashers were off to an incredible start. You know, they go with a pool that we don't typically see. The question is that one wipe going to be enough of a setback for them, or will they be able to catch up even in light of this Warlock advantage? Now, Nautira is going to be engaged already by Method NA, and this is a boss fight that we don't expect them to have too many problems with, but we do already see that their tank has had Purgatory triggered a little while ago, so that's going to be something to think about. And then instantly Dark, going to make me eat my words, going to get chunked. Then we're going to see the Death Knight get chunked as well. JB doing a phenomenal job of keeping everyone healthy as the Warlock starts to pump out some damage.
Yeah, E-Man's got to be very careful when he doesn't have that Purgatory available. He needs to know his limits and call for an offensive when he needs it. Dark Slashers has done a good job. They've pulled all of the trash over from Ivanir's room all the way back over to Corsalax's room so that they could line of sight all of those worms together and do them really cleanly. By being really patient there and hanging out in that room, they're able to do a ton of trash really efficiently all together, and now they can head straight over to Ivanir, perhaps even take him with those two mobs in the center of the room. They only have one melee compared to the two melee of Method, so it'll be much less dangerous for them to handle these two blueberries with the boss.
Yeah, we've seen the blueberries getting plucked right with the boss quite a few times. That's what Dark Slashers is going to do, but I want to point out that Warlock, because I just noticed that we didn't really talk about what that advantage is. So the Warlock going to be able to enslave a demon, and that's why you actually see the Chaos Bolts going out. The Warlock is, of course, still going to be playing that Affliction spec. That demon is also going to be able to buff up members of the group, and that's why they go for that pathing. That's why that death is actually very warranted. You send the Druid up, you then res everybody else up on the team, and you enslave that demon just about as early as possible. And now Method NA about to take down Nautira, put her back in her spidery tomb, and then from there, they will be able to emerge from the spider's nest and get working on their third boss. Dark Slashers now going to be working on Ivanir, and it looks like maybe they, because I put my attention over onto Method NA, it looks like they took care of the blueberries without dealing with Ivanir.
Yeah, they decided to take a little bit more slowly. Damage wasn't looking too crazy out of Method on that previous pool, so they likely have this Warlock buff ready to go. Of course, we want to keep an eye out on Method, because that Warlock buff, they're going to put it on their favorite monk, and then once they pull the boss with that monk having the buff, he's going to be spinning, and they are going to be further their winning. Ivanir is really not that scary, of course, over on the side of Dark Slashers. They have to be careful of this triangular pizza. There's nothing really too dangerous that can happen over an Ivanir. As long as Method, they actually decide that they're in the lead. They decide anyway they're going to take the boss, that they are going to play this a little bit safe. They've got some haste bubbles. They've got that big monk buff going on. Mitt is doing some insane damage with his spinning right now. Perhaps Marv has even decided to buff himself. That buff from the Summoned Warlock ad will make this group member do incredible damage, and they've cleared up this trash so cleanly. When Dark Slashers did this pull, they ended up doing it with a lot more trash. They did it with a pull from the previous hallway as well as with a pull from the following hallway. So they've cleaned up all the trash in this room very handily. Their boss is on 70%, whereas Dark Slashers' boss is on 50%, dying much more slowly because, of course, all these haste bubbles levels in the Corsolex room will make his health drop very rapidly.
Yeah, that is the thing. And then those same mechanics that we were talking about that were potentially going to be that cheese are just going to increase the DPS of Method NA as they move around the room, get to pick up those buffs. And now Ivanir already going to be at that 30% mark for Dark Slashers. Method NA, one thing to take into account, of course, even though they are much further at this point as they are already working on that third boss, they do have that additional 5 seconds against them from the death count. Keep that in your mind, but it doesn't look like that is going to be the thing to really set them back as they are at about even percentages here, a full boss ahead.
Yeah, a full boss ahead, and they're very closely catching up on boss health percentage now. Dark Slashers also has an incredibly long run in between them and Naltira. We see that they've decided now that what Method has done is they've grabbed some of the following trash out of the hallway to engage with Corsolex. That way they can take advantage of the haste puddles in the room to kill that trash easily and safely while they're taking care of the boss. Both of these bosses are looking to die, perhaps even maybe a little bit sooner for Method than for Dark Slashers. There were a couple of scary moments over on their side, but they are all at full health now, doing well. These bosses should die at the same time, and Method will maintain a full one boss advantage over this other team. Yeah,
it looks like Corsolex may just fall first, and that is going to be how it goes down. So now they're going to be moving on over to their next boss, and they still are going to have Ivanir to have to deal with, and that will be their final boss before they get on over to the true baddie at the end of this dungeon. Dark Slashers need to find a way to pick up time, and you know, this is one of those scenarios where I have to ask you, Sours, you've been in scenarios like this quite a bit. You've been a competitor yourself. When you look at this dungeon, is there a place where Dark Slashers can do something that's so remarkable that catches them up, or are they relying on Method really just screwing the pooch?
This is certainly Method's game to lose right now. They're looking really strong. They only had one incidental death. Of course, 4 of their 5 deaths were in order to do that battle res skip over to Fellord Zakal. Dark Slashers, on the other hand, has had 4 deaths, and they haven't done a single skip at all. So their 4 deaths were when they attempted that first boss, and they are going to be soon racking up an additional 4 deaths as they head over to do this skip towards Zakal. You know, Method has nothing even that terrifying at all left for them in the dungeon. They just have a couple of trash pools in between them and Ivanir, and then maybe a couple of trash pools following that in the center of the room.
And Ivanir, this pool right here is going to get them a resounding amount of percentage, and that's what you actually are going to see here, trying to line of sight all of those mana worms, get them all nice and grouped up so you can get that nice AoE damage, and like you said, not going to be too much of a problem there. They still do need to get to that 100% mark, but they're racing against themselves at this point. They need to make sure that they don't have any flukes. You can see those stuns coming out from the monks. They're going to get out those leg sweeps. That's going to protect them just a little bit more, not allow any of them to do any abilities. Now they're going to have a few of those shades that they have to worry about. Once again, the stun's going to come out. Great toolkits all around and great damage from these monks. Let's see if they decide to actually pull the wardens. I feel like at this point you almost don't even need to pull them with Ivanir, but they say, hey, we know this is the thing with them. They don't let anyone else dictate their tempo. They're just going about the pools the way that they practice them.
Absolutely. These are the pools they practice. If they had a team that was much closer to them, then they would have done the same thing. And so they're doing it now, even though they have a sizable lead. They're doing a really excellent job. Marv is pumping on these mobs as well as this boss right now, doing tons of damage to these. There are going to be some sparks spawned by these mobs in the melee, and you see it kills both of the Windwalkers together. That's why you have to be careful when you pull these things.
Remember how I said like a mess? Like that could be the thing that maybe. So we are going to see both of those battle rests are going to come out, but they lose Lust. That Lust did go out before they went down, and Purgatory already going to be off the table. Method getting kicked in the shins here. Another burst of damage going to go out. Dark hobbling around on one little monk leg. I know that they do that sometimes on purpose, but here definitely wasn't on purpose. Now they need to make sure that they drop that pizza slice down in a good place. They're going to try to drop it right on top of the other slice of pizza. Dark Slashers still just going about this steady. They already have made their mistakes, like you did mention. The first, it's so funny because Method NA actually had the 7 deaths the last time too. 5 of them being intentional, 1 for the skip at the beginning on the slimes, the other one to actually skip up to the demon to get that warlock buff online as quick as possible. Dark once again again going to be chunked down. But Dark Slashers, they do have those 4 deaths that they have to work against, but now Method NA going to be up to 7.
You know, even though Dark Slashers messed up that first pull and fell a little bit behind, Method has just continued to pull further and further ahead thanks to the utility that this Enslaved Demon has done. You know, the power of these NPC buffs on players can really not be understated. These mobs provide an incredible benefit to these teams, and having these teams tailor-picked for dealing with these map pools is really, you know, that's the strategy that so many teams have implemented in order to gain some wins. They're doing a really excellent job with all these pizza slices, making sure to drop everything nice and cleanly. And now if one of these guys decides to get a little bit clever and roll through one of these puddles, or who knows what, then they could die very, very quickly, but that shouldn't be a problem. Now Tira about to fall for Dark Slashers. They've done an excellent job. They haven't had a single mistake since that first wipe, but they are, you know, still a full boss behind, and they have a long, long run in store for Edel before they can even engage Feller Zakal.
Now, obviously, both of these teams just look really gosh darn good right now. Oh, JB actually going to go down. Only 16% left, but no battle res is going to be left, so that's going to have to be a res that comes out or a run back. So because JB has gone down, they should be able to get Ivanir down, because they are going to have the Leech coming in from that Death Knight. The Warlock obviously going to have a lot of sustain. It's the Monks that you kind of have to worry about a little bit. Hopefully at this point they haven't invested Karma. We know that they already did drop here, but no battle res is on the table. Going to be a little bit scary. Ivanir at 1% does fall. Now they're going to have JB back online at that check mark, so no big problem there, but that's 8 deaths for them. I was about to say, though, with these two teams performing the way that they have so far in this series, do you think that there's anyone else left in the tournament that can take down either of these teams that's going to drop down into the lower bracket?
Well, you know, I really would think that the real dream scenario is that we see this same matchup in the finals. I would love to see Dark Slashers ride all the way to the victory. I think, you know, Rev's comeback has been really remarkable in this tournament. You know, I'm a huge fan of this guy. They've reset Purgatory just then, of course, for E-Man. You know, he doesn't have those abilities anymore. They are casting a res on somebody. Of course, nobody's dead anymore, so who are you resing? Now, when you kill these bosses, right, there is a checkpoint following every single boss. You see the 4 deaths coming out now for Dark Slashers. They are resing up, and they're going to be able to head into Zakal, and Method has just got to head on over to the final boss of the dungeon and then do the rest of this cleanly, and they should be fine. Of course, if they decide to go to the last boss and something really bad happens, it is an incredibly long run back for them.
Even something mildly bad becomes incredibly bad because of how the geography of this dungeon is going to work out. Method NA right now needs to finish up their trash percentage, but Dark Slasher's not too far behind. They're going to have that additional 10 seconds on them. They actually went for the same skip that we saw Method NA do earlier in the dungeon. Method NA does it earlier because, as we mentioned, the Warlock. Here, Dark Slashers do it just because that is trash that you don't need to deal with. They're already at that 96% mark, and you can see they pull some additional baddies alongside Zakal to get closer to that perfect 100. So they do have those 10 seconds there. Now they're working on the boss, but if something happens, if a full team wipe does come out from Method NA, all of a sudden they need to run for such a long amount of time, and maybe Method NA can catch back up, or sorry, maybe Dark Slashers can catch back up, because Method NA doesn't have any battle reses available either at this point, but they are going to go ahead and pull Vandross. They are going to pull the last boss of this dungeon. Now, Vandross has quite a few mechanics here. First thing that we got to know, you don't want to jump into those little geodes that are getting spawned.
Yeah, so we know that these things look nice and sugary and tasty, and JB was looking a little bit hungry last time, as he did decide to dip his toes into the pizza and lose his life. So hopefully he's not too hungry for this sugar. As he gets hit by one of these explosions, they don't have a battle res for quite some time, and this boss does quite a lot of damage. You really don't want somebody to die. If somebody were to die before the 50% transition, that could be absolutely disastrous, as their body will teleport, and if you don't have a res available or anything else, then they are just going to be so far away from the boss, and there's not a lot you can do to get them back into the fight. They just have to continue to play safely, you know, drag Vandross left and right and avoid these crystals, making sure, you know, to kick Accelerating Blast when appropriate, and as well as for Sephu's procs if any of these guys are wearing it, and they should be doing just fine. We did see, of course, both of these monks died to similar crystals earlier, so we'll see if they are more aware of them now, and as long as they don't lose anybody here, this is looking really good and really clean out of Method.
They made sure to really cross their T's and dot their I's. They made sure that they got Purg back online. So when you see something like that, you know, they're like, okay, we're going to invest some seconds here. We're going to invest some time here. We're going to invest some effort here to make sure when we go into Advisor, we got everything that we need. We have all the tools we need. And basically, we just don't need to just not screw up. Now, we are going to see in just a second here, they will be going into that intermission. They're going to need to make that run back now all the way back to Vandross. And on the way there, they're going to bump into some little buddies that really aren't real friends.
Yeah, there's some really scary Spectres here, similarly to how there's a lot of melee damage from various trash mobs as well as the boss in the dungeon. If either of these monks decide that they want to hang out with these guys for too long, they are going to die very quickly. So it is going to be up to the tank as well as the Warlock to handle all these guys while everybody else follows just behind.
These ads can really wraith your time if you don't encounter them the right way, and you can see that that is not something that they want to do as they are seconds away from getting down Vandross, and Method NA will advance and guarantee their spot for their team and representing Method in NA for that first MDI LAN.
Of course, there is always the possibility, you know, these guys are dropping a little bit low here, perhaps playing a little bit sloppy. You never want to get too comfortable because that's when the mistakes happen. They're doing a nice job. They've re-controlled this Warlock pet, engaging back on Vandross. All they have to do is continue to play as cleanly as they have up until this point, and then they'll be looking very fine, and they will be advancing here to the first ever Mythic Dungeon Invitational LAN. Really good showing out of Method NA, and I want to say absolutely incredible showing out of Dark Slashers. Now these guys, in the event that they do end up losing this dungeon shortly, they will not be out of the tournament. This is still the losers bracket. There is another chance at life for the Dark Slashers in the event that this doesn't quite end up coming up for them here.
The thing with Dark Slashers, as we mentioned heading into this dungeon, is they haven't really proven themselves yet until today. They haven't had the hardest test. They haven't gone against the hardest teams, and even in a lot of the dungeons that they won, whether it be reverse sweep or not, it was because other teams were making mistakes more than they were. You know, it wasn't that they were having these fantastic times where they were blowing people out of the water. Method NA is one of the toughest teams in the world to actually take down, and Dark Slashers shown that they are a team, and if we played this series constantly and kept playing this series over and over again, we know that Dark Slashers are a team that could take down Method NA. It looks like Method NA, more times than not, is going to be able to get the better of them, but Dark Slashers should be able to improve as well. We know this team hasn't been together too long, and now that they've been put to the test, they've shown that they really are a top dog in the NA region.
Absolutely.
Curse, a little bit of exercise here for Method. Obviously, Method EU not going to that global end, but Method NA will be able to go there for them in spirit. So congratulations to them. The strategy working. Again, they were fine giving up the second map, although obviously they put up a great fight.